Hello, I'm Riley, and this is the Diegetic Advancement Podcast.
Okay, today I'm going to cover the rating system in ADnD and its similarities to modern day story games. I'm going to cover a new upcoming role playing game by Luke Gearing and the Melsonian Arts Council. I'm going to talk briefly about my narrative war game and what else I'm up to. And I'll close out with, as always, some content shoutouts. Let's jump into rating AD&D versus story games. Okay, so piece mainly inspired by conversation on Jason's Nerds RPG Variety Cast between Daniel himself, and that's spilled over onto some other podcasts as well. To oversimplify, Jason likes the rating system from AD&D, and Daniel does not. So, what is the rating system in AD&D? In order to level up, a character must train. This costs gold and takes time. When you go to train, the GM provides a rating. Based on how well the character roleplayed, training takes longer, the lower your rating, and it therefore costs more. It's probably worth defining roleplaying here. This isn't how you portrayed your character, expressed their emotions, or used a funny voice. It is instead how well you fit your class archetype. As a fighter, did you fight stuff? As a thief, did you steal stuff? Now, criticisms of this are that it could be antagonistic, rating your friends on how well they played. Favoritism could come into it, rating someone consistently higher than another player, or that it's unnecessary. Good play leads to gold and not dying, so it's already rewarded. And I could likely list more. Now, I think this would fall into one of the AD&D isms that are criticized by more modern players or people who play different types of games, like story games. I'm not saying that to be negative; it's just my perception, and I think it generally just be surprising if you told a newer player that that's how AD&D was played. However, there are a lot of similarities between the original games, or classic adventure games to differentiate them from other types of games, and story games. Fiction first is a common principle, but I'd argue that the rating system in A&D is also a commonality. Let's look at Dungeon World and Blades in the Dark to see how they do progression. In Dungeon World, firstly, you mark XP when you fail a move, which is anytime you roll dice to try and achieve something. And then at the end of each session, you do the following. You choose one of your bonds, and a bond is effectively a relationship between your character and another player's character. You choose one of your bonds that you feel is resolved, and if the other player involved in that agrees, you mark XP. Next, you look at your alignment, and if you fulfilled that alignment at least once, mark XP. Lastly, as a group, you answer 3 questions and marking an XP for each yes. Did we learn something new about the world? Did we overcome a notable monster or enemy? Did we loot a memorable treasure? So there are some similarities here. XP rewards are tied to how well you played the game and your character, and sometimes it's in the hands of another player. Let's look at Blades in the Dark, which is similar. Firstly, you mark XP when you take a desperate action, and at the end of each session, for each of the following items, you mark 1 XP or 2 XP if it occurred multiple times. Now, let's look at the Hound, which is effectively one of the classes in Blades in the Dark, which is described as a deadly sharpshooter and tracker. Their questions are: did you address a challenge with tracking or violence? Did you express your beliefs, drives, heritage, or background? Did you struggle with issues from your vice or traumas during the session? Again, we see some similarities. You are rewarded for how well did you roleplay, this time using the more common definition of how well you embodied your character's personality, but also how well did you fit the archetype. Looking at the lurk, which might be the closest to a D&D thief, it asks, did you address the challenge with stealth or evasion? If a D&D thief addressed a bunch of challenges with stealth or evasion, they would likely receive a high rating, and in Blades in the Dark, that is also true. In addition, players who are not good role players or do not play their archetype well are punished, or not as well rewarded as players who do. Now, I bring this up for 2 reasons. One, it's interesting to look at the commonalities between a classic adventure game and other types of games, namely story games here. As I mentioned, fiction first is a commonality that I see, though I think the differences come in with the goals of how we play and then how we interpret the meaning of fiction first. And 2, it'd be interesting to hear people's thoughts on, do they like either one of these systems? one, not the other. Specifically, Daniel and Jason, if you're listening, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the story game version of this, and do you like that more or less, and why? Or anyone else that's listening, of course. Okay, and as promised, onto the product spotlight. Okay, so the product spotlight this week is a product that's not out yet, but the quick start rules are available if you sign up to a newsletter, and the pre-launch Kickstarter page is live. It is Swivers, which is a rule set by Luke Gearing, David Hoskins, and the Melsonian Arts Council. And I'll read the promotional intro for it. What is Swivers? Swivers is a tabletop role-playing game about bastards. You and your gang of criminals scarper through heists and sewers, stalk through the filth of the smoke, and if you're lucky, you'll make it out with a few extra shillings. The whole of the city is your filthy, sickly oyster. Swivers is a lightweight set of rules married to a full set of tools and tables for running a game in a chaotic sprawl of the smoke, its many districts, and the midden. What a city it is. Corrupt officials, looming war, rogue sorcerers, monsters below, and knobs above. Violence rests as thick as the smog, nothing is sacred, and it's always bloody raining. Okay, so the setting really reminds me of Bastion from Into the Odd and Electric Bastion Land, except pretty much more dark and gritty and Mudcore-esque, or Blades in the Dark, less Eldritch Horror, Eternal Night stuff there. Okay, so I just wanted to say that the quick start rules are really impressive. Despite being rules light, it certainly is fully realized. They're sort of similar rules complexity to Basic Expert, with rules for just about everything that you can think of for sort of low-level gritty city and dungeon crawling. The setting is very evocative and communicated really well through the book. Lots of things just have these small little descriptions that tell you something about the world. The equipment list has all these little quips from a character in world that tells you something about them and the setting. Monsters have nicknames and evocative descriptions. The magic is very weird, which definitely tells you it's a low magic but high risk. Magic is powerful and dangerous. Really awesome. Combat is what you'd expect, except for one point which I wanted to highlight. It has an interesting take on weapon versus armor and weapon speeds, in that armor doesn't determine your armor class or your ability to not get hit. It instead gives you damage reduction, which is certainly not new, but you still have a armor class. In this case, it's called defense value, and that is instead determined by your weapon length, with being unarmed or using a ranged weapon giving you the lowest defense value. And then as your weapon goes from short to medium to long, your defense value increases. Shields also provide an increase. Initiative works inversely to that. The bigger the weapon, the slower it is, and so you act later. So a dagger is going to act before a two-handed sword. The caveat being, when you charge, the longer weapon goes first. The end result of this feels like it should be pretty close to using weapon versus armor and weapon speeds from the older games, but it's a really elegant way of implementing it. Overall, I think this is a really great rule set, whether you plan to play the game or take inspiration from it, either the setting or some of the rules. As always, Melsonian Arts Council make really beautiful books and products. Luke Gearing does great writing. Not included in the quick start rules is an adventure, which will come out with the full set of rules. The quick start rules are available if you sign up to a newsletter, which is a little bit unfortunate. And the Kickstarter has a pre-launch page. Details for both of those will be in the show notes. Okay, next up I'm going to talk about what I'm up to gaming-wise. No updates on the narrative war game. I need to get my stuff together and actually send those messages out. Plan is to do that this weekend. I need to put a digital map together so that people can sort of draw their orders in and send the messages out. If you've said that you're interested. Hopefully expect a message from me this weekend. If you are interested and you haven't let me know, there's still time to do so. There's likely not going to be any more updates for the narrative wargame for a couple of weeks until I've got it running and I've got some play happened that I can talk about. I'm likely to record a video of the first round of play so that I can sort of describe that and show that off. For now, that is all. To round that out, I do have a call from Daniel from Bandits Keep, so I will play that.
Hey Riley, Daniel from Bandits Keep calling in. The rules for the skirmish play by post, I guess we'll call it, sound really cool and simple. I mean, I was walking the dog and listening, so I may have missed some of it, and I didn't have my book in front to check your numbers. No, I'm just kidding. But I know it sounds perfect. I like that you're already right from the beginning involving the classed, the leveled class and leveled characters. That's pretty cool because you can make that choice. Who do I want? Six figures that are going to fight as man plus one, or do I want a couple of figures or however it works out that are going to fight as three men? I mean, that can make a big difference with certain situations, especially how you divide up the group. So that sounds really cool and fun. I'm looking forward to it. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, I don't have too much to comment on there. Thank you, as always, for the call and for listening, Daniel. Go check out Daniel's stuff at Bandits Keep on Spotify and YouTube. Bandits Keep Actual Play on YouTube for some solo ADnD stuff. And he's also the co-host of Monsters and Treasure. The details for all of that will be in the show notes. Check it out. Awesome stuff. I'm going to give a sneak peek to what I'll be talking about in the interim between narrative wargames now. I am planning to run a open table original Dungeons and Dragons game at a local game store. So at the moment I'm planning on having a town, wilderness, and mega dungeon, with the gameplay loop being traveling from the town through the wilderness to the dungeon, doing some exploration, and then traveling back all in one session. Time will be 1-to-1, and obviously there'll be a rotating cast of players with it being an open table. I don't have much to say. I should have some updates on my attempts to recruit for that in the next episode. Maybe I'll have some interesting insights there. But for now, I've got a question for anyone listening who wants to call in or send me a message. How do you handle, or how would you handle downtime activities for a game like this? And how do you handle characters potentially not returning with and removing XP and items from the world? So 2 questions really. For downtime, I'm thinking of having a physical sheet where characters can sort of fill in what they want to do in between sessions, and they'll make progress on that until they return. So it could just be 1 week if they return for the next game, but they could work on it for multiple weeks if they're gone for a little while. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on how you might handle that, or if you've handled that in a similar situation. And then characters leaving the game. I can envision someone claiming a powerful magic item and then never coming back. I don't know if I should redistribute that or just be a little bit more liberal with handing out treasure in between in the sessions. Again, I'd be interested to hear how you would handle that, or if you've handled that yourself. Okay, I'm going to jump into content shoutouts now. Okay, first up, a interesting blog post from Goblin's Punch on using static HP. Over on the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, Jason interviews the creator of Dragons Beyond, a pre-ADnD retro clone, with BJ from the Arcane Alienist. Merc the Meek is on the mend, talking about different resolution mechanics and travel. Daniel from Bandits Keep talks about their plans for the new year and whether beginners need to play a simple game. And Brad and Yohai review ASE1, Anomalous Subsurface Environment, a cool Gonzo Mega Dungeon. It's unfortunately been my first week back at work from the holiday break, so that is all I've had time to listen to this week. As always, the details for all of that will be in the show notes. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you next time.
If anyone is listening, I'd love to hear your feedback. You can reach me via Spotify, SpeakPipe, Discord, or email. Details, along with everything I've talked about today, are in the show notes. Bye for now.